People who are no longer bound by NDAs, what are some surprising secrets that you can expose? Manipulation of data to give false impressions of reliability was something I saw quite blatantly utilized with little repercussions. My company was struggling to meet on-time delivery schedules, and for numerous years was as embarrassingly low as 40%. A new manager comes in, and within months, we are now boasting an on-time delivery rate on a brilliant 95%. Turns out all he did was change what constituted an on-time delivery. Each time we knew a product would be late, we'd notify the customer of the delay and ask them to confirm they still wanted the order. If they still wanted the product, the on-time delivery would be recorded against the new expected date as opposed to the original promised date. The company literature was being sent out boasting of our 95% on-time delivery, now amongst the highest in the industry, when in fact, we were by that point meeting less than 30% of initial delivery schedule targets. It was so simple that I'm sure numerous companies are getting away with such underhand tricks. Commenter reminds me of the airport that was constantly getting complaints about how long it took for the checked baggage to arrive at the pickup point, so they just made people walk 10 minutes further so they weren't waiting as long. Story 2. I once got hurt at work, a concussion specifically on camera. I have a history with concussion, like symptoms. I was 99% sure I hit my head, but I lost all memory of the accident. I ended up missing a few weeks of work due to the severity. I wasn't 100% sure if I had some sort of mental breakdown, so asked to see the video so that I could confirm my injury. They flat refused to let me see the video and told me there was no evidence that I hit my head. I offered to sign away any rights to sue, and I wasn't even asking them for hospital bills or paid time off. Long story short, I sued them. I won and had to sign an NDA. I got my wages and hospital bills paid that I wasn't even asking for and was finally able to get the video. It was a 100% no-doubt head injury, complete with a loud bonking sound effect, and me falling down and leaving a dent in the bulkhead that I hit. After the fact, the office staff told me that they were under orders from upper management to lie and saw they didn't see anything on the tape. They said this was standard for anyone who gets hurt, to just lie about it and let it play out in court. I obviously quit soon after. Commenter, for future reference, an NDA can't prevent you from reporting a crime. Even if the original incident was an accident, the cover-up could potentially be criminal. Story 3. In a tech support role, one manager used to boast his team's average call times were the lowest in the company. While average call times were in the 17-minute range, his team was constantly under 10 minutes. His team was awarded multiple times, and his strategy was adopted company-wide to all customer service and technical support teams, including our internal IT teams. That strategy was under a strict NDA, as we did not want to allow competitors to emulate it. When our call center would go bid on contracts, it became an awesome metric. Our customer satisfaction scores are on par, but we have call times 20 to 30% lower than our competitors. The dirty secret of the NDA that I was not allowed to disclose? Their big method, just hang up on people, straight up. Find a way to say, okay, go ahead and do that, and call back if it doesn't fix it. Then hang up. Don't wait for confirmation. Okay, so reboot your PC and your problem should be solved. Thanks for calling. Asterisk, click asterisk. Eventually, they came out with more useful metrics that track things like first call resolution, which absolutely shredded this company, and they went out of business a year or two later. Commenter, I remember reading an IT Hell blog back in the late 90s or so, where a guy was documenting the crafty IT call center he was working. And the manager's favorite guy there had amazing numbers, because he'd just tell every caller their warranty was voided and he couldn't help them. His throughput was amazing. Huge call volume. Very low call times. He was the department golden boy. Thing was, he considered any action taken as voiding the warranty. Turning the PC on would void it, according to him. So naturally, they put him on a fast track to management. Story 4. About 20 years, I signed an NDA with a very large record company regarding their attempts to get into selling their catalog online. Streaming, sales, etc. It was a minefield because they were still wary of pissing off high street retailers, and that's where the charts came from. These attempts were frustrated by their top-level corporate guys. One week, they all went to a what is an MP3 conference in Buenos Aires to get them up to speed. The thing is, they spent so much time partying. The only talk which seemed to stick was the scare tactics about how teens could scrape MP3s from the web, and they could be copied and redistributed easily. When they came back, every item in the catalog was ordered to be scrubbed from the web. No 30-second previews. Nothing should be audible. Not a hint of audio. Lock it all down. Put all the tapes in a chest and seal it with concrete at the bottom of the sea. That's going to make everyone go back to CDS. Good old profitable CDS. Story 5. The private school I worked for was for students identified with giftedness. The owner of the school administered the giftedness test. Can you pay the tuition? You're gifted. Can your sibling pay? Them too. Your cousin? Neighbor? Kid you know across town? You're all gifted. Story 6. I worked at a terminal disease charity, and half the people would order things for themselves and charge it to the charity. An eye-opening job for a 16-year-old. Story 7. I worked for BuzzFeed, and they told us to post on our Ask Reddit and then steal content for our articles in my BuzzFeed. NA says I'm not allowed to tell you all that. Commenter, I made a bingo card for a TV show, MasterChef, and BuzzFeed took it, replaced the logo, and released it as theirs. Oh, they also blocked me on everything. Story 8. I briefly worked at a university in South Florida in the late 90s and early 00s. I was chosen to be on an academic integrity team, basically reviewing claims of plagiarism and cheating and deciding between the 5 of us whether it is valid or not. We were made to sign NDAs when we accepted the invite to be a part of the team. There were 3 instances where an employee that was taking classes there clearly cheated, and the issue was brought to our attention. Those 3 times, the cheating was blatant. All 3 times we were told to let it go, as it would look bad for the university to have it get out. I'm not sure if this is common for other universities, but at the time, I was under the impression that it was common practice everywhere. It was ultimately one of the main reasons I ended up quitting. I was and still am disgusted by it. Edit, I did not expect this one to blow up the way it did. Just wanted to say that I am loving and cringing at your stories. The seediness is astonishing. Commenter, I brought allegations of plagiarism to University of Houston. The accused was a very popular superintendent of a nearby school district. I was interviewed by the university's integrity panel and often felt like I was the one suspected of wrongdoing. They even suggested the possibility of hackers uploading a plagiarized version to their database. I was disgusted. They went quiet after a year and a half, so I spoke at the Board of Regents meeting and asked the president of the board, Tillman Fertitta, to do the right thing. A week later, they concluded the investigation and pulled his dissertation. Google, Lance Heint plagiarism today for more about the story. Story 9. At my old job, Pam helped me reallocate my clients' ad scheduling so I can invoice out a little extra for the last month of December 2014, helping me hit my yearly budget. I got let go 2 weeks after that, and I believe the original plan was to fire me under the justification of missing my yearly budget. Instead, I got a severance of $15,000. I believe Pam knew or heard what the lay of the land was and helped me out. Appreciate you, Pam. Story 10. It consultant of many, many winters. The most critical applications in banking and finance run on badly outdated machines, hold together by duct tape, prayers, and compressant dust, standing in dark, wet corners in mostly forgotten basements. Also, those systems are written in the most obscure and long-dead programming languages, or even directly in assembler for a certain chipset, written by code wizards in their own idiosyncratic dialects, who are now long retired or even dead. Backup systems are mostly non-existent, or the data tapes are worn down to basically transparent tape. Even had a case where a cleaning tape from '99 was still in the bay due to the robot being faulty. If a cleaner or janitor pulls the wrong plug to find an outlet for their vacuum, there is a decent chance that whole banking institutions begins to crumble. Most of those systems will also never be updated due to their legacy status, aka. We don't know what this is doing, or even how it is doing, what it is doing, but it is a critical part of our whole infrastructure and nobody dares to touch it. But we will never invest the necessary sums to analyze those systems, write documentation, or even replace them. Edit. NDAs for companies I did projects for are long gone, but some of them are currently in an investigation process for fraud and tax evasion, so I won't disclose exact informations. Commenter, had a professor that worked for a company with the government of Ohio to update all of their databases. When they took a look at how they had it set up, I kid you not, they were running all of Ohio's social programs off of an Excel spreadsheet millions of rows long. Story 11. Fortune 500, real estate, long time ago? We know about the black mold problem. We always knew. We do not disclose it. We intentionally do not look into. We don't want to know exactly what kind it is, because if it's dangerous, then we legally have to spend money to fix it. The only department that is allowed to talk about the black mold problem is press and PR, because only they know how to bury it correctly. That was not a great work culture. Added, just dealt with a black mold problem in an apartment complex. Found it on the walkthrough after stupidly signing a lease first. They ignored me when I brought it up repeatedly. I got the city involved talking to the high-ups in the company. The 180 they did after that was hilarious. They refunded everything and canceled my lease. You could almost smell the panic in the emails. Story 12. I was never under an NDA, but the hotel is under new ownership, so I guess I can say it now. The hotel had no internet connection starting around 1 a.m. to 6 a.m., like clockwork, every night. IDK if it was just a system fault or if it was cost-cutting. But without internet, the security cameras didn't work or record anything. The fire alarm system doesn't work either. The alarms go off, but it doesn't call for help. So if we had a fire that started at 3 a.m., for example, then unless someone else that's driving by calls it in, I have no idea what's happening. One night we had an assault happen in the parking lot. The police needed camera evidence, and our cameras didn't record anything because the internet was out. So that was fun explaining to the detectives. Commenter: as someone who works in property management, this seems like an insane risk to take to save a small amount of money. Most fires start during those hours, and an insurance fire investigator would easily find out what was going on and why there was no call-out. One moderate fire and the owners would be out of business. Someone correctly pointed out that perhaps fires don't mostly start at those hours, but those are the hours in which fires grow unchecked. I should correct myself and say that the middle of the night is when you need the fire safety systems the most. Story 13. In Prince George's County, Maryland, county transit bus drivers are instructed following an accident. They are not to speak to anyone until a supervisor arrives on the scene. An approved method for not talking, especially to other drivers involved, is to feign injury. There's actually money allotted to pay the fines related to wasting 911 and emergency resources because analysts determined it was cheaper than costs associated with drivers accidentally admitting fault. There's also an entire audit and analysis team related to accidents because of the sheer volume of people who falsely claim to be on a bus during an accident. Story 14. One surprising secret is how many products marketed as handmade or artisanal are actually mass-produced in factories overseas. Brands rely on clever wording to sell the image of small-batch craftsmanship, but behind the scenes, it's often a far cry from what's advertised. Story 15. Was never bound to an NDA somehow, but sat in to oversee the technical aspects of Herbalife meetings. We're talking meetings with the highest-level sellers and their board. They spoke about how to manipulate low-income and unintelligent people to make them millions of dollars, how to teach others to scam others to make them more money. Commenter: Herbalife reps were told to specifically target single mothers, as the concept of working from home, before it was mainstream, along with the possibility to bolster their tight finances, were the best prey of such pyramid schemes. Story 16. Worked in technical customer support for a IT hardware company. We were sold a bad batch of chips from a supplier. The chips caused random watchdog resets, which would cause random crashes, reboots. The company got a settlement due to it to remediate it, but the MB8 legal types deemed it too expensive to fix what was already in the field, so they fixed it in support. We had very strict talking points when our customers would report this issue. Everyone in the support team knew what the issue was and had each worked several cases of it. But our script made us act stupid like it was a unique case that had never happened before. It is kind of hard to do that when you have replaced multiple units for the same customer in several weeks. But if you diverted from the talking points, you got counseled by management. This issue caused several very high-level issues at many of our customers. We knew why, and we were told to act dumb and bury it in process procedures, so we didn't take the hit on needing to replace the known faulty hardware. As a hardware engineer, everyone knows that game. So we're the first that actually tests this very common chip at its specified boundaries, and you're so dedicated to customer service that you already have a firmware fix for this exotic issue that you have never seen before within 2 weeks? Sure. Blacklist for future designs and move on. Story 17. Hasbro has tried to make the following 2 films. Stretch Armstrong, a gritty re-imaging starring Taylor Lautner, the wolf from Twilight, with a Nolan's Batman feel Candyland. A Lauder-style epic for children starring Adam Sandler. Both got pitch packets made before ultimately being shelved. Last I heard, the Candyland idea is still kind of alive. Story 18. Worked at a hospital specializing in cancer care. They were doing something new, actually targeting the type of chemo. Most centers do not. So suppose you get Cancel C. But the insurance companies, Gov, mandates you get chemo for cancer AB before treatment for C, as the money increases by like 10-fold. Downside for the patient with disease CE is they have to endure way more bouts of chemo than if they just targeted Cancel C. So if you ever find yourself in that really bad boat, make sure your doctor's treatment plan is for the right disease vice for the wrong checkbook. Story 19. I worked for a company that oversees and enforces self-regulation for one of the power grids in the United States. My job was to help secure it against cyber attacks and to help write the regulations that enforce those protections. I had panic attacks on Sunday nights because I knew at work the next morning we'd go over the list of everything not compliant and the lawyers would argue they were, and nothing would get done. Many times the lawyers would tell me that I wasn't interpreting what was written correctly. Then I'd remind them that I wrote it with a committee, and if they didn't believe me, they could go look at the minutes taken in the meetings. Instead, they would just document their justifications for being compliant and not actually secure anything. The US power system is now so vulnerable to cyber attacks that it is only a matter of time before millions of people have their lives thrown into complete disaster and potentially hundreds of thousands that will die. I just can't even think about how bad things are now. Commenter: I remember some journalists saying something along the lines of the most depressed people I've ever interviewed all were cybersecurity specialists. Story 20. I don't know if I was ever bound by an NDA for this, but I used to work for a contractor for a major US plane manufacturer. They will literally hire anyone. I'm an ancient historian. I do Roman stuff. My experience in flight is limited to sims and being a passenger. They have no standard for aeronautics for their teachers. They're techs. I don't know. Story 21. Not under an NDA, but I am not allowed to say this to people. My employer is an HCM company, and the department I work in administers COBRA. For our friends not in the US, COBRA is a law that allows an employee to pay out of pocket to keep benefits they had while they were employed after a separation. This has been a thing since 1986. In many cases, your employer has to reinstate coverage with the carrier. There is no punishment if they do not. They have to inform you of your eligibility within 45 days or face fines with TAMRA, which is part of the IRS. We are not allowed to tell you that your former employer hasn't let the carrier know. We have to take the blame. There are some clients where I work where we do inform the carrier, but carriers like Blue Cross, Anthem, and Cigna are right now refusing to accept the reports we send them, and your coverage remains inactive. But the majority of the time, the client, employer, is responsible for reporting to the carrier of your COBRA election. There is no maximum time allotted for reinstatement. I've seen cases where the employer, client, has not reinstated benefits for 1 year until the beneficiary tried to use the coverage and was denied, and they had been paying $2,500 a month just for their medical. This was not illegal, just irresponsible. Reinstatements are the #1 issue I deal with, and it's daily. I've tried to get my employer to make an effort to ensure the client reinstated in a timely manner, and they refuse, saying they do not want to anger the client. I've also written letters to President Biden and VP Harris explaining this situation and to present policy. An expansion of TAMRA to include reinstatement deadlines would do wonders. Story 22. I worked at a grocery store. We had lots of prepackaged produce and other baked goods. I was told to pull off all the expiration date stickers and replace them with new dates because they still looked good. There were so many things they did that probably could have gotten them fined heavily if I had known better and reported them. They were a local chain that had like 10 stores. Apparently, they only have 1 store left now and are very close to going out of business for good, according to my parents. Story 23. I worked at a startup that tracked employee happiness, supposedly so they can make employees happier. But in practice, it seemed they were preemptively getting rid of unhappy employees. No need to wait for them to quit. Story 24. Taco Bell's cinnamon twists are made with rice pasta. The moisture content is so high, the water in the pasta boils in the fryer, puffing them up. Then just sprinkle cinnamon sugar on top. Commenter. When I worked at an Indian restaurant, before they would allow me to see the flatbread recipe, I was required to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Story 25. I worked for a website creation company back in 1999. Managing the website for a big brand, large bank that was sponsoring a round-trip paid ticket to the Super Bowl. I worked on the website that collected all the entries, and I posted the rules that the company's legal department wrote to describe the rules of the contest. A random winner was to be selected for the prize, and I wrote a software tool to randomly pick the winner to be used when the contest was over. When the contest ended, I was told to forget my tool, forget the rules. Just look in the database and find someone in South Florida, where the Super Bowl was in 1999. So the company wouldn't have to pay for airfare. Story 26. The Victoria's Secret fashion show in Shanghai in 2017 was an absolute crap show of corruption, kickbacks, and duck-ups. The Chinese government took Versus for an absolute ride for so much stuff. And that's not including all of the middlemen who wanted to get their beaks wet as well. The amount of money that Versus spent to have their fashion show in China was astronomical and got them, at a minimum, investigated by the US government for the amount of bribes they were paying. Story 27. I worked for a healthcare facility that started collecting private patient information to share with insurance companies in order to secure better contracts. This wasn't diagnosis data. It was lifestyle data, including spending transactions. They were trying to find ways to obtain that information when I was leaving. When I asked if patients were aware, they always gave a vague answer, which essentially meant no. Story 28. Tesla and Rivian electrical components are made in the same facility by a large electronic manufacturer and even share personnel. This once caused Elon to throw a fit and threatened to take the contract somewhere else. The solution? For the next visit, the company separated the lines by a wall and told Elon they had ended the Rivian contract. They still produce both and also the components for the new Ford electric models. Story 29. The lady who owns Columbia Sportswear neglects her animals to the point of death, and then she just buys more. I was supposed to be a caretaker for them, but there weren't even basic med supplies like Bute and Swat or vet wrap. She wouldn't call the vet for almost anything. 2 goats died of malnutrition. Another, its entire hoof fell off. 12 chickens died. 2 mini donkeys died. The guinea pig was kept alone in a hamster cage, and she kept her late husband's dog Monty locked in a dog run. Her dogs were permitted out, but not Monty, even on leash. Initially, he was allowed out and I got with him great shape-taking walks every day. But one day, she stopped allowing even that. I quit when she started talking about getting 30-plus sheep and pigs. It was a miserable place, her mansion. I only worked there a year and brought in my own supplies to treat what I could, but it'll always break my heart I couldn't do more. I called animal control multiple times, and they never helped, even with the goats who looked like walking skeletons. Rich people can do whatever they want to, living things. Story 30. A very popular website you would know with a public good guy persona for platforming creative people and supporting innovation is actually secretly a pit of vipers who take advantage of those same creatives. Behind the scenes, they have a well-worn strategy for taking advantage of startups in the space. They approach these small startups with promises of partnership, dangle a lucrative letter of intent, a job, and then start working with you on how to start integrating your innovations into their platform. Then the manipulation starts. They slowly start adding friction into the process, so you feel pressure to find creative solutions to making your technology work with their bad system. You think you're helping them, but what you're really doing is helping them supplant you. Meanwhile, you're burning so much time and energy working on jumping through pointless hoops that your growth stalls out and your runway shortens because they technically haven't acquired you yet, but you're still required to pay yourself with your revenue during the lowy period. After gaining just enough access to the startup's technology and background, and after you've helped them work through a lot of the sticky bits, eventually pull back their offer, cut ties, and poof, they develop the tech themselves and launch it soon after the rug is pulled from under you. The company's aggressive legal team ensures this tactic stays under the radar because the NDA they make you sign during the lowy process is so blanket you don't realize it covers this exact sleazy behavior. But the damage is already done. They are the big gorilla in the space, so even when they implement a worse version of your tech, it basically squeezes you out. If you push back with your own lawyers, they throw you a little hush money in exchange for signing an even more draconian NDA, and then you're hosed, but you don't have really any other option if you want any money after months of work. They've done this to multiple startups. I honestly spent months in a deep depression thinking it was something I did and how I wasted years of my life on it and let it slip through my fingers. An acquaintance in the industry called me because she hadn't seen me at the last few gatherings. I completely fell apart on the phone. I shared some vague bits of what went down, and she connected me with someone else who literally had the exact same thing happen to them. We swapped notes. Then I found a couple others it happened to. I went from depression to being livid. I'm still tangentially involved in the industry, though. Another avenue, and now when I see other innovations pop up from other startups, I now explicitly seek the new innovators out at conventions or at professional gatherings. Because I didn't take the hush money, I don't have to worry about the liability like some of the other folks do. While I can't talk in specifics, I can still speak pretty pointedly about what things to look out for from big companies that may wish to acquire you. Here's how they will take advantage of you. Here's how they screw you, etc. I can't ever get retribution for what they did to me, but I can at least prevent them from doing it to others. If I can give any advice from this nightmare, trust in agreements, not in people. It doesn't matter how good you think they are as people, or how good the mission is you think you are supporting. The people in a company can change at any time. If it's not in that document, it is worthless. And anyone who says they care about you in the process but won't put it in writing is lying. Story 31. I worked for a very prominent sports broadcast. Hardcore fans would always get so angry when the broadcast was narrative-focused. But the reality is that majority of viewership metrics aren't that hardcore minority that are so extremely vocal on things like social media and Reddit that would complain about narratives, etc. Production meetings weekly were about keywords and key narrative lines to essentially sell these teams and players to the audience over and over and over, because majority of viewers only tune in for a moment or a game, so you got to repeat it to make it stick. And it did work in terms of those narratives actually sticking and building player brands. So much was manufactured and about working together with broadcast and teams to build fandom. That is the #1 goal. Could we go massively in-depth on a hardcore level? Yeah, and the talent team always wanted to, but production had the data and was like, the fandom immediately turns off when we do that. So I guess the dirty secret is sports broadcasts, hardcore analytical fans are never the target demographic. Probably not a secret, but some sport fans really miss that Lolo. Story 32. I worked for a company that made DJ equipment, turntables, etc. They put a metal plate in their cheaply made turntables so they were the same weight as Technics when in reality they were plastic garbage. Story 33. I've worked on many film sets over the years, and by the time the NDA has expired, you've already seen the movie or TV show. In my experience, production NDAs are in place to protect the stories and prevent spoilers from being leaked before the project is released to the public. Story 34. Early 2000s, I worked in the clothing department at Walmart, And one night I was handed a memo that I was to secretly cut out all the tags on a list of product that said "Made in Myanmar" because the brand was suddenly trying to hide that they were doing business there. I believe it was Hanes. Story 35. I worked for a company who worked for a company who worked for Cisco networking. Cisco had created a new product for small business, basically a cheaper version of their normal routers and switches. When hired, I was one of about 20 people, most of whom had zero networking experience. We were told that it was done that way because they wanted non-techies specifically learning the product. This made no sense to me. We were told that we had to get CCNA certifications before we could go live. We were then given a month of bootcamp training and personal study sessions. It took about 2 months and a few tries for everyone to get the certification. The problem was that we were 20 kids with little to no technical or networking experience, working on a new product that we technically weren't versed in. We were given generic CCNA training and no training on the product itself, and expected to handle all tech support for the entire country. I once had a call to fix a connectivity issue for a chain of banks. The guy who called me admitted to making $450 an hour and asked me to take my time solving his issue. He called the guy making $20 an hour. Believe it or not, it was the classic tech support question, "Is it plugged in?" That solved his issue. He forgot to plug in the power. I'm not sure why this was supposed to be tied to other banks, but I'm guessing that it was at a main hub, and something wasn't going out to the branches or something. I didn't ask. 90% of the employees on that team quit within the first 3 months of working there. Story 36. No great secret here, but the beverage industry is absolutely cutthroat. If you think about it, you'll never walk into a Walmart that doesn't have both Coke and Pepsi, or Budweiser and Coors, etc. To that end, if you work for Coke, you'll never get rid of Pepsi. You'll never convince your clients, the stores, to stop carrying those core brands. So the battle shifts to whatever odd flavor of vanilla cranberry Sprite or Diet Extreme Mountain Dew they can concoct. They'll always have 3 shelves of Coke and 3 of Pepsi, but the battle is all for that one shelf of the new experimental or seasonal flavors. Because beating the competition means winning this tiny battle in the overall war, they get absolutely toxic on their own employees to execute. 16-hour shifts, unreasonable expectations, long hours, unsafe working conditions, etc. The list goes on. They work union employees hourly to 39.999 hours and then clock them out automatically. They'll make a salaried office worker drive by a 7-Eleven after work and restock some items. We're talking like an office accountant, not someone who works in the sales or delivery functions. They'll pull in HAR rep out of meetings to go construct a Santa Claus train out of soda boxes at Kroger because the hourly union guy hit his time for the week. With most jobs, if you need an hour for a doctor's appointment, it's not too much hassle as long as you cover your responsibilities. Not this business. Employees were given iPhones or iPads that were low-jacked with GPS tracking. If you ventured off route too long, automatic write-up. If you took too long in a store, you were written up for a delay. If you cleared a store too quickly, you were written up for not schmoozing the store manager more and selling them more seasonal flavors. The entire system is designed to work people to the point of exhaustion, ding them for every single thing, and then essentially blackmail them with the threat of being fired. Everyone is on a perpetual performance plan. There was a bounty system. Employees got reimbursed to narc on other employees. Visit a store on the weekend and see some product out of place. Rat out the guy who runs that route and you'll get a $25 coffee card. Never mind the fact that it's Saturday and the product was probably misplaced by a grocery store worker or even a lazy shopper setting beer back in the diaper aisle. Every aspect of that business is designed to give the employer absolute control and complete freedom to fire you on a whim. In good economies, they'll turn over staff like socks because there are always a million more idiots looking for the prestige of working for a Fortune 500 beverage company. In bad economies, they know they can't backfill, so they'll browbeat you into submission knowing that you can't find another job. I could write a book on this industry. And here's the kicker. I was a manager there for 1 year. That's all it took, so see the ugliness. Story 37, former agent for a driving app here. I used to handle the driver's part of the app, and that part was rather messed up because I would often get drivers asking why their accounts were taken down. I stopped being surprised after realizing that for every 3 drivers that reached out or so, 2 among them were shut down, either for fraudulent activity or for mostly sexual misconduct. Frauds include starting and stopping without the rider, messing with the GPS to charge the rider with surcharges, especially on airports, or attempting to upload bogus or edited documents. About this one, it was disgustingly easy to bypass the docs filter because there were plenty of countries where the app worked that didn't run background checks. On top of that, privacy policies wouldn't let us disclose the cause of the deactivation either, thus resulting in drivers often trying to sneak back into action with a duplicate account, only for me to laugh in their faces when finding out they were stonewalled because of their original account. On the other hand, there were a handful of drivers who presumably didn't do a thing wrong, but then again, Policies would leave our hands tied, and we had to give out the bad news anyway, if you know what I mean. I'll maybe edit this comment if I can remember more. It's been about 5 years since I stopped working there. Story 38. Former professor at a Florida State College here. No NDAs, but one. Claim of harassment not investigated thoroughly because faculty victim was male and unpopular with administration. 2. President of college twists faculty arms to change semester grades. 3. Faculty initially failed a student for the semester over blatant use of AI to complete writing assignments. The faculty member was coerced into allowing student to rewrite all assignments in the 6 weeks after the end of the term. Story 39. A ridiculous percentage of the U.S. bullets are made in Grand Island, Nebraska. Not just the red boxes, either just about every company has a large amount of bullets made for them there, Sierra and Nosler being the 2 exceptions. The only difference most of the time is the color of the tips. Wouldn't be so bad, but the equipment is WW vintage and falling apart. Security and safety are half-assed, and they chase off anyone that won't work 70-hour weeks. Commenter, something I finally know about. My wife's family is from Grand Island, and her grandfather worked there for a decent amount of time. He's exactly the kind of guy you don't want making your bullets. He would tell stories about all the dangerous stuff they did there, and even bragged about all the stupid, lazy, dangerous stuff he got away with because he thinks he's the slickest guy who's always sticking it to the man when he's really just risking getting himself blown up. Story 40. Not I only had to sign an NDA-style contract regarding the specific place I was at, but I spent about a year doing on-site security for an Amazon data center. There are 5 things that people don't realize about such places. 1. You won't ever find them on Google Maps or any similar app. They're such important infrastructure that not even a company's competitors want to risk anything happening to them. 2. They eat a lot of pizza. Enough pizza that I had to be briefed several times how the local pizza delivery service was a security threat because of how much pizza the techs and workers ate. Someone had to know something important was here. 3. These sites guzzle power to the point that they have their own city-sized transformer stations dedicated to them. Any problems here in the center either shuts down or there's an attempt to run the whole place off of semi-truck-sized generators. 4. Each stack of servers makes about $100,000 of revenue for Amazon every minute. Each building has at least 100 of these server stacks. 5. And finally, every single ounce of power, info, data, etc., all runs through a bundle of fiber optic wires that are easily accessible because they require an absolute maddening amount of maintenance. They are also hard to replace as replacement length has to be order weeks in advance, which is all a long way to explain that data centers are much easier to find than you think, while also being surprisingly fragile pieces of infrastructure. Even the slightest downtick in energy to the building can cost the company millions of dollars every minute, while a whole server stack going down can take weeks to replace if it can't be fixed quickly, can erase a large portion of the bottom line, all while the place is run as efficiently as possible by heavily underpaid techs, mechanics, software engineers, and security personnel. Have fun with that knowledge. Story 41. I used to work in packaging, and there was a big promotion coming up for the 2018 World Cup. Basically, the beverage company we were working with thought they'd be able to sell more of their product if they were able to correctly predict the winning team to use for their promotion when the winner was actually revealed. Obviously, if you waited for the champion to be revealed, it would be too late. The supply chain has got to start well in advance. Basically, the beverage company did correctly guess champion team, and a lot of people involved in this deal had to sign NDAs basically stipulating that they couldn't go around shouting, "I know France are going to win because XYZ company have asked us to print all this France merch in advance, etc., etc." You don't have to be Nostradamus to guess the champion of the World Cup, but it's the fact the company we were dealing with were suspiciously certain of it, along with the secrecy surrounding this knowledge. Story 42. Not really exposing a secret here, but I am disgusted by it. My job requires me to look into the minutes of meetings. One of my clients was a school. During one of the meetings with the board of directors and the parents, they addressed the bullying in the school. One of the parents said, "Just leave it, let the weak ones fall out." And that was the end of it. Story 43. Call center employees share bad experiences with each other in a secret log by the customer info. They know exactly who the assholes are. Commenter. Yes, I did a stint in a call center as a kid, and we had the foot guy. He would call multiple times a day, every day. So with multiple call centers servicing the brand, we'd get him from time to time. I only got him once. If you were a dude, he'd ad-lib you a poem. If you were a girl, he'd ask what shows you were wearing. The notes were a sight to behold. Countless pages of reps talking about this weird dude and how they couldn't wait to quit. It was like a graffiti wall of call center therapy scribbles. The more tame records for other customers were things like, "She'll cry until you take 5.00 off her bill," or "Do not escalate, she's a git." Story 44. I did SEO for Leap Force. Google is always listening. always listening. I had to listen to a ton of recordings and identify if they were accidental and if what I heard was a command. I've heard everything you can imagine. Story 45. There was a shell-laying transportation boat that was seized by pirates, I'm pretty sure, back in, I think 2018. It happened sometime between 2016 to 2018. My memory is crap. And Shell knew about it for weeks before they told anyone. Families of the crew, police, anyone. I remember sitting in on the meetings. I was just the IT guy who had to set up the video link and then stay in there just in case something went wrong. But don't pay attention to what is going on in the meeting. You can play on your phone in the corner. How had cameras watching the whole ordeal? No idea where the feed was coming from. Looked like it was really long range though. Like they had people island hopping and setting up new cameras every X amount of hours so they could watch. They have huge drones out in the field, but these didn't look like drone shots. They weren't moving, just stationary, and you could see that heat blur type effect, what you see when you try and zoom in too much on something ages away. You could fairly reasonably make out the figures on the boat. Not super clear, but clear enough to tell who was crew and who was a pirate with a gun. The just absolute nonchalance of the people in the VC making jokes when they saw what looked like someone about to be shot or shots were being fired was just disgusting. Something akin to what I'd imagine the Roman elite saying about some peasants they'd just sent in to fight a lion for their entertainment. So many other messed up things I saw as an IT guy for a shell-owned corporation. Story 46. My wife used to be an associate in a well-known multi-level marketing company. I won't say which one. She dragged me along to one of their How to Get Rich in This Business seminars where someone way up in the pyramid was speaking. The speaker at one point was advising the audience on how to commit tax fraud by deducting everything imaginable and then some on your taxes as business expenses. Some of it was borderline, but a lot of it was just straight-up tax evasion. My wife was still in her true believer phase at that point and thought the secrets of the universe had been revealed to her. We argued about it for a couple weeks afterwards until she finally agreed to ask our tax guy about it. And he basically said, "Hello, that's totally fraud. I hope you like the color orange." Worst part was the reason the speaker was advising everyone to commit tax fraud was so you can invest more back into your business, which translated from MLM speak means keep pumping money into the pyramid and making us rich suckers. Commenter. It's so heartbreaking to have a friend or loved one get sucked into a MLM scheme. I had a close friend who was so naive, and I would try desperately to talk sense into her when she would say things like, "They say it's better to go in on the highest level," aka buy a massive amount of product. And I couldn't go anywhere without her trying to sell to literally everyone, including my friends or family members, waitresses, the person checking us out at the store, etc. It was so embarrassing. But what made me have to end my friendship with her was when she kept hounding me to go to the meetings and become an associate. It was a health supplement MLM. And once she actually started screaming at me, telling me, "You just want to be sick," because I wouldn't buy her products and join the MLM. The ludicrous things she parroted to me after going to her meetings indicated that this was a cult. Story 47. When I was just out of college, I interviewed for a position at a major cable TV phone company. They called it a marketing job, even though it was a customer support call center. But that's a whole different story. I signed an NDA that I wouldn't share any customer info because I sat through some calls to see how they operated. Long story short, call centers 100% hell with customers they find annoying. I sat there for 3 calls if I remember correctly. Call 1 was totally normal. Call 2, the customer wanted something on their bill comped that the tech refused to do. After the call, the tech said something to the effect of, "I have the authority to do that. I just didn't want to. They were kind of annoying." Call 3. The person on the phone was being a real idiot. So the tech said they needed to put them on hold. He then did a lap around the office, came back and said, "Sorry, nothing we can do." He then hung up and looked at me before saying, "And that's what I call a dramatic pause." Based on the compensation sheet they showed me, it was suspicious if a call ended too quickly, but going too long would reduce your pay. They would do anything, including walking around the office for no reason, to make sure they were within the time frame that would give them the max multiplier to their pay. Story 48? Well, I signed one with Activision for an advertising campaign many years ago. The big secret that I can reveal now, almost a decade later, guys, there's going to be another Guitar Hero in 2015. Story 49? Used to work for government. One of the department heads didn't realize his mic was still on during a meeting break and said some less than flattering things about his colleagues. He came to me the next day and wanted it removed from the tape and made it very clear that my career would be limited if I didn't oblige. I obliged, though I had already made a copy to my personal server earlier that morning, just to have leverage in the future, should I need it. Story 50. Many years ago, my dad was manager of the meat department at a chain grocery store. A new store manager came in and told him that whenever steaks started looking a bit gray, rather than mark them down a bit, they were still okay to eat, just older and unappealing in appearance. He was to slice them laterally and position the bright pink interior up to repackage and keep them the same price. My dad soon quit over that, as he couldn't in good conscience do it. Story 51. There's a government in East Asia that was, or still is, running a low-key sterilization campaign in Central and Eastern Africa. They do it in partnership with a private company I used to work for. I was sworn in on the project in September 2013. I was with the company until late 2017 and had to sign an NDA that I wouldn't say anything. The NDA didn't specifically mention sterilization, but instead the methods used. The company I worked for with funding from this particular East Asian government set up free clinics in half a dozen or so African nations and offered free healthcare to the locals. Naturally, they went for it because they were getting much better quality of healthcare than they had ever gotten before. They were baited with the quality treatment and then sterilized without their knowledge. The methods used were non-surgical, and the company I worked for was given a quota of 30,000 to 50,000 sterilizations a year by the government funding the project. I don't know if they're still running the program. The company is still in business, but I don't know if they've still got the contract or if some competitor offered a better deal to that particular East Asian government. This is as far as I'm willing to go on the details. Story 52. I 100% believe everything that was said about the work culture at Blizzard because even the companies they outsourced to had similar issues. I worked for Client Logic, later Citel, when they had the contract for in-game customer support for World of Warcraft, aka WoW GM. I was at the campaign from around the time Burning Crusade launched until a couple weeks before Wrath of the Lich King was released, and it was like the Wild West. We were actively encouraged to break workplace norms when it comes to harassment, language, and personal conduct in the name of desensitizing us to what we will see in-game. We were actively told that we could say whatever we wanted, harass whoever we wanted in whatever way we wanted, and as long as nothing got physical, nothing would do anything about it. I was at that campaign from late December 2006 until October of 2008, and I saw more harassment there then, all the rest of my life combined. And again, we were the outsourced branch of their customer support. I couldn't imagine how bad it must have gotten at Blizzard headquarters where there was no outside influence trying to temper how people were acting. Story 53. Intel Corporation used to go around to colleges and hold programming contests, and to the winner, they'd give a mid-grade laptop and a gaudy trophy. Back at corporate, some of these winning code bases would get tens of millions of dollars poured into them in attempts to get them to product release. Story 54. Feels weird posting this as I'm a big-time lurker and not technically under any NDA, but I was working for a medical devices company where the financial director was also the production director who instructed the production teams to use a prototype calibration machine for their main product, neonatal ventilators. The electronic engineer who designed the prototype was not happy, rightly caused a big fuss, and ended up resigning. That guy was an absolute hero. Big respect. That company kind of shattered my perspective on ethical engineering roles, and I ended up changing industry. Story 55. The exact recipes for beef and chicken product recipes for Subway, Tim Hortons, Walmart House Brands, Canadian Prison Systems, American Prison Systems, Halal Meats, M&M Meats, Sobeys Brands, Loblaws Brands, Nanaim, PC, Prime Restaurants Brands, Alsafa Meats, many others. I already know what you're all going to ask me. Best quality and most consistent, PC. Runner-up, M&M Meats, most consistent and relatively okay quality, American Prison Systems. Runner-up, Sobeys Brands. Worst quality by far, bar none, no contest, Walmart and Tim Hortons. I'd rather eat boiled grass, and I am not being anecdotal or exaggerating. 1. They do not give a flying duck about their products. And 2, they use the lowest quality and cheapest ingredients the FDA and CFIA will allow. Which tells me something. They would quite literally use worse and cheaper if they could. They'd make food products out of asbestos if they could. Story 56. I used to work for an ocean container company. Employees are laid off based in large part to anonymous surveys. These surveys are outsourced, paid to conduct them. Each survey is assigned a link that's directly linked to that employee's IPVPN. If the survey is generally negative, that employee is either placed on a PIP or is laid off. This specific company has forced their managers to have 100% completion or their roles are on the line. Bottom line, lie. Always lie on them. Commenter: I worked for a market research company that apparently thought those of us who actually handled the data would believe the outsourced, completely anonymous surveys they had us do weren't tied back to us directly. Come on, we're the ones who actually do this stuff on a daily basis. Just how dumb did they think we were? They also sent out reminders to do the surveys, but only to those who hadn't done them yet. Completely anonymous. And yet you know I haven't done it. Story 57. I know of at least 3 major, and I mean major Superfund level pollution of very toxic materials, environmental disasters that are completely unknown because they took place on private property, and the companies that did it are covering it up. Often this means that the company owns a tract of land that they keep fenced off and empty. As long as they don't sell it, nobody needs to test the soil. Having a good understanding of what happens to whistleblowers, regardless of NDA, I won't name the companies. I don't need to get forcibly died. Story 58. Microsoft is fine with video games being a bit crashy, but if a title so much as mentions Sony in the credits or accidentally displays PlayStation controller iconography, it's an immediate quality assurance testing fail. Story 59. Y'all would be surprised at the amount of investment in commercial real estate the Saudis have in this country. I was under an NDA to not discuss the financial backer of a massive project, valued at the time of around $440 million, 2008 ninths dollars here, in the DC area. In the same land deal, our firm and those that had to work on the project had to have an NDA for the sale of a large chunk of land in the same development to a company that doesn't exist, that built a massive data center next to the massive data centers in the DC area. We were given more than market value for the land and told not to talk about it. We just amended our site plans and scratched that section off the plan. Story 60. The iPhone 4 had a bad antennae in it, but not all devices. The build process was prone to an error slightly above expected norms, but not super common. We all knew. The job was to tell you it was your fault, or it was @'s fault that said, for the customers that forced past that point, we swapped. But there was an extra level of serial number tracking above and beyond the typical process. So your swapped phone would come from a fixed batch. That meant that if your swap didn't relate to connection issues, you got a typical iPhone replacement. But for those with it, you were part of a silent recall. Apple denied this aggressively, and Apple retail employees were fed a lot of weasel words to diminish the perception it was a recall. But it was, 2010 to 2011. Story 61. I used to work in the marijuana industry. We sprayed chemicals all over the weed to prevent mites. Also, if the water for our plants was too basic opposed to acidic, we would add battery acid to the water. Story 62. I worked for Hewlett-Packard about 15 years ago, testing all their printers. I had to sign a 10-year NDA saying I wouldn't reveal their trade secrets. Their printers sucked then, and they suck now too. I'm not an engineer, so I could never tell you how the printers work anyway, or rather don't work. Story 63. Every single cooking competition show you watch is rigged. The judges have no say over who wins. The winner is chosen prior to filming by the executive producers, and then the show is crafted around that winner to mimic a story or journey they can sell to audiences. Story 64. Danny DeVito has a longtime agent manager who, unbeknownst to him, is a racist. She apparently doesn't realize all the calls are recorded, so there's years of her saying some ducked-up crap to people in a certain office. He, on the other hand, is a really decent chap. Story 65. I organized the canteen at my office and was told to push a certain chocolate bar over others as it had a higher markup. I am eternally haunted by my actions. Story 66. The surviving Avengers and Nebula wear a quantum suit of some kind in Endgame, based upon upcoming Happy Meal toys. My NDA may have been up long after this was a relevant leak. Story 67. My ex-BF's company went from legal operating company to greedy operation that exploited financially troubled individuals. He had signed an NDA and non-compete. When they took another step to legally defraud people, he was able to report to authorities. His ex-boss actually sued him for violating the NDA, and he had to hire an attorney for court. When they got there, the boss was being charged federally, and assets frozen, couldn't afford to pay his attorney. He also tried to sue him when the ex opened shop 2,000 plus miles away. His attorney advised that it's not enforceable. The case ended up on a TV show about scammers. Story 68. A mortgage company I worked for shut down because they lost Fannie and Freddie backing. The CEO told us it was because of 3 loans that shouldn't have resulted in this punishment at all. It was his son. It was vastly more than 3 loans, and it is so bad he has permanently lost his license to be a loan officer. Story 69. My colleagues and I were asked to alter audit reports at a nuclear power plant in Mississippi. All 3 colleagues quit shortly thereafter, and one of them signed an NDA for thousands of dollars. I was fired. Feds stated they did not talk to the auditors as part of their investigation when I made a similar contemporary retaliation complaint in writing. I was offered an NDA payout, but decided to testify instead. They will probably announce more settlement from the case I testified in soon. Story 70. I am a playtester for pen and paper RPGs. One asshole who hates women had way too much decision-making power, and the guy that was supposed to balance it out was a huge enabler. Anyway, playtesters were supposed to be credited upon release, but he went through and removed every single woman's name from the playtesters list, because every group with a woman in it criticized a mechanic he made that was incompatible with battle maps. Story 71. Walmart corporate office puts a screensaver on all their workers' computers with a message urging them to donate to an emergency fund for their FT or near FT warehouse and retail workers. Instead of giving them healthcare or PTO, Walmart retail and warehouse workers are kept just below FT so they can't get benefits, and the vast majority receive government benefits. Your taxes are subsidizing millions in benefits for the richest company in America. So the richest CEO in America is richer. Everything in the second paragraph of this post is public knowledge. Story 72. AK, if this is necessarily a secret but safe way, and most likely all other Albertsons-owned companies, has a rule that unless caught in the act of stealing, people can pretty much just walk out of the store with up to roughly $900 worth of crap, and the workers technically aren't allowed to stop them unless they actually see them pocketing the items. Cops can be called, but generally they won't do much if there's no proof. Story 73. I've seen an early cut of John Wick 2 where all of the animal handlers were running around on screen in green spandex bodysuits, running alongside the horses, carrying leads for the dogs, etc. Just all of these people who are invisible to the actors and the rest of their world. Absolutely surreal. Story 74. I worked at Verizon, and we were told we had to use special offers to try and save customers. An elderly man called to have his wife's phone disconnected after her death, and I didn't do any of the saves. Got called in for QA overview and got written up. Story 75. Worked in compaction testing. So when digging utility lines or making road, gotta test it to make sure it's been packed down enough to minimize shifting. Got in trouble because I wouldn't pass a road in front of a school, needed to be at 95%, and was only hitting 88% at best. Others were totally fine fudging the numbers. Story 76. I haven't seen anyone mention this, so just an FYI. The NDA situation does not apply to classified information. So if you work for a defense contractor or any other company that requires a security clearance, keep your mouth shut. Shouldn't have to say this, but I'm sure some people might talk when they definitely shouldn't be talking. Story 77. General Electric Cyber has offices all around the world and intentionally violates GDRP and decrypts SSL traffic and centrally logs all that EU data into the US and simply pays the fine for the violation so they are able to build their analytics. Story 78. Our salsa recipe was 2 gallons canned tomatoes, 1 pound cilantro, 1 seeded habanero, 1 bulb of garlic, 5 onions, salt, and pepper. It's nothing special, but my boss acted like it was a recipe for the Fountain of Youth. Story 79. There is effectively no difference between most brands of canned tuna sold in the US. If a producer is short on an order and another producer has extra product, they'll buy from one another and relabel the cans. Story 80. 14 years in my current profession and I've signed at least 4 dozen NDAs. The biggest secret I can expose is that not one of these actually includes dates of expiration or meaningful terms of release.